So in Ecuador, scientists decided they want to be able to create snowstorms using science. A few years pass by and they test it. Although it fails, the global temperature starts to cool to unprecedented levels. Hi guys, welcome to today's video. In today's video, we'll look at a scenario in which the world freezes over. As this experiment goes terribly wrong and causes South America, even equator areas, to turn to snow. As it quickly spreads from the north, south, it goes into areas that's never reported snow in the last while. With it quickly moving to Europe and quickly freezing the world over. On top of that, it just gets worse. The water all freezes. That causes the water to turn to ice. It has one problem. This will destroy places that rely on the water, including trade. Will now have to be about land because basically everything froze over because this experiment that was launched went totally wrong. With hundreds of thousands of people dying, crops failing due to this experiment going wrong. And now, just turned to ice. Everything froze. So as you can see, the world froze. And no, that's not perfect for ice. Be slightly blue, but not this blue. As you can see, that's ice. The ocean completely froze over. The land completely turned to snow. Let's see what happens after hundreds of thousands of bad things happen. Colombia and Peru create a coalition to invade Ecuador because they think they need to invade to stop this madness. But they're wrong. This doesn't help them at all. By invading, they didn't make anything better or worse. But Ecuador is erased from the map. And some people are probably happy about this. But it turns out it wasn't their fault. It just so happened it was a failure within the system. Both countries near the equator having unprecedented weather as everything starts snowing and the water is frozen. With this invasion going well till they move into Quito and they find where this happened. But turns out there's no way of fixing it. But they continue their invasion. They're not worried about how there's no way they can fix this. They're just invading because something wrong happened, terribly wrong. So it's not great to have this much snow this far south, because that wouldn't work or be possible, but somehow it does happen in today's video and everything froze. Which is not good, because that would mean a lot of bad things for the global economy, including recessions and everything. Unification. And this Ecuador attack probably won't be the last one with nobody stopping them, because at this point it will take way more time to get aid to countries that are being invaded. Yes, the ocean is frozen, so that really means that there's a lot less ships able to move through the ocean because they need to be capable of breaking through. And as you can see, Ecuador is off the map. And the EAF, or East African Federation, decides it's a good time to unite. Now, they're starting with two nations unifying this week. Not this week, this week. But anyway. They're starting with Tanzania and Kenya uniting. Then South Sudan joins, followed by Rwanda and Burundi. Then Uganda joins, and almost instantly, the Democratic Republic of Congo unites. As this is to help offset the effects that this frozen climate will have, with some nations probably going to collapse. With Ukraine struggling to get anybody to help them at this point, and everyone freezing on the ground, it's like -40 in this area of the world. But anyways, let's see what happens. And that being a big problem, because now no one can attack no one, basically. It means this war has basically stopped functioning, and basically they're stuck. But Russia knows what to do, because they've experienced this a lot. Basically, they just send more troops. And they send 1 million troops. Because they're not going to freeze, they send them all kinds of winter coats. As it gave them the advantage after Ukraine made a counterattack. Which led them to do this, because, when Russia gets attacked, they succeed in the winter. So let's say they were counterattacked. With Russia actually succeeding, partially because there's less aid getting in, and possibly less communication because of how cold it is. People are also, at this point, probably focused on how to stop the worst from happening to their country, so they're not going to focus on the outside. This probably will isolate more nations to helping others. This will probably be a breaking point in NATO and different alliances. With that happening, disputes between nations get bigger, with nations blaming others, with Russia just taking advantage of the situation and getting larger. The only problem we have is that, well, the world is frozen. With Russia being kicked out of most international agreements for this. So, yeah. With Russia being isolated but trying to herd, because nations can't really. Plus, the need of fuel would go up, meaning Russia would have that advantage with like India and China selling more. So Russia gets put in a good spot. And Saudi Arabia, not really in a good spot because of this. Because oil is much harder to extract in the freezing cold. But Libya, which already had a struggling everything, collapses. Which is a big deal. They just straight up collapsed. Shockingly enough, they did. With some nations, like India would have probably a famine, because, yeah, an economic crisis. Pakistan and India would probably get into a war over the situation, blaming each other for the problems. With India or Pakistan declaring war on one or the other, but let's say India declares war on Pakistan over this. Because Pakistan, let's say, didn't get hit as hard as India, let's say. Because Pakistan has a lot of colder areas already, so maybe that worked. But India also provoked a war. And they claim it over territorial disputes, I would say, is why they're doing this, but they're probably not going to say that. And Pakistan being brought down by India. Well, they may be one of the strongest nations in the world. They're not really a match. China not wanting to intervene because they need to work on getting their food production up. Turns out Pakistan wasn't hit any less hard, even though India tried to say they weren't hit hard, because it was just basically they did it. Basically, they blamed them for messing with the machine, so they invaded them. But turns out there's no evidence that actually happened, so people are trying to figure out who was at fault for that failure. With Libya's collapse being like a warning sign to most nations that if they're not careful, they could and will probably collapse. With Morocco taking back Western Sahara, with Algeria saying that's illegitimate and illegal, Algeria invades Morocco. Morocco didn't expect that. Because Algeria thinks that the Atlantic isn't, that Morocco isn't being hit as hard, even though that's not true. And they blame Morocco for the problems, which turns out to be false. With Morocco launching the counteroffensive as American weaponry, European weaponry comes in, and they're able to make a big advance. And their advance is so strong that you wouldn't know what happened. As they're going right through snow and inclement weather from snow. With this being a big deal, Algeria completely at this point has to surrender because there's nothing left for them to fight. Any bit of territory. Overall, this world would have loads of problems since it froze over randomly, like trade is stopped. Suez Canal basically became useless and used to be useful, but anyways. With it eventually becoming not necessary. Eventually, because at this point, trade is really, it's really like the ocean is land, kinda, if you think of it. It's all frozen up, so you can't really trade in it. With, for some reason, Egypt deciding to call a partition of Libya, they got the most land. And Tunisia got a lot. Although, what are they going to do with this frozen tundra land? Because everything turned to tundra. Everything froze. Which would cause big problems in a lot of municipalities, cities, towns. Yeah, that would destroy the environment. But anyways, Egypt gets bigger. Countries are getting worse economies. NATO has started to fall. The collective security organization fell, and all defensive alliances have started falling apart over this. Because it's not like anybody's defending anyone. With Canada and Russia not being hit hard, nor is the Nordics for some reason. Nobody knows why. Maybe they all teamed up to do something. With Canada sending stuff around. What is going on with those colors? But anyways. And so let's see what Canada does. Well, Canada buys Alaska. No, they don't. They annex it. Which causes a bit of problems, but most of the US's economically prosperous areas have froze over and probably stopped being economically prosperous. With the US after this declaring war on Canada. The Canada's really, why would you with just Alaska? They're like, oh, resourcely, Alaska's good, but at this point, is it really resourceful if it's all frozen over? But anyways, let's see. The Americans invade in the Pacific coast, the Atlantic coast, and into where everyone lives. And basically, Canada at this point is in a bad spot. But with the land being so cold, Americans can't really hold on to it. It's everything's frozen. And this being a problem, Mexico takes advantage of this situation to invade from the south. And this is the fall of America, really. America thought they were strong, but in reality, their strength went away when their economically prosperous areas froze and stopped being really good. Basically, most of their areas with wealth isn't very cold, so none of their infrastructure would be ready for this, which would cause a big problem with their strength economically and everything. With the Americans going to the peace negotiating tables because the Canadians take their capital. And let's see how the peace negotiating goes. Okay, as their power has completely went away. Plus, I forgot to mention, NATO has already fallen. So has Russia's alliance. Russia is slowly expanding. With the extension of the country and the weakness, people are starting to suspect other nations of being at fault with this, trying to mess with their economies. But their economy is completely falling. Britain has no money basically at this point. Nations with no money absolutely have nothing left. But Benelux seeing that it's probably best to unite to prevent against it. With countries starting to unite, the Baltics unite, they see what's going on. The Nordics unite, although the Nordics aren't hit too bad because they've always been frozen where all their resources were. They're still frozen. The Nordic unification. Where else could we see a unification? With Portugal and Spain uniting. Because they can and it looks good on the map. With Russia being expansionist. Central Asia basically already collapsed. So Russia just walks in. Since it's already collapsed, there's nothing they can really do. They can't really resist. Basically, these nations fell due to the fact they couldn't trade with anyone. And they're used to being, not cold, so, their economy wasn't based for cold weather. And we're starting to see more and more unified borders. Although in Europe, a problem starts with Germany uniting with Austria. With many nations realizing Germany kind of went extreme right after this, basically. Not extreme right, extreme left instead. Yeah. And this is a problem because they're expansionists again after NATO fell. And they're saying this is so they can support their economy and stuff, saying that it'll make Czechia's and Slovakia's economy better if they get to do what they want to do. Basically, they invade it. And they do something with the territory that's a bit wrong. But anyways, they take all of its economy to help the German economy. The Czechia areas with the new Czechoslovakia, with the Slovakian puppet being created. As you can see, the world is starting to not get good. Because of many problems. With some nations starting to unite, like Kosovo and Albania, which causes a bit of a problem in the Balkans. With Serbia annexing Montenegro. Now, this is where the problem starts. Because Serbia claims that Kosovo is rightfully theirs. Which leads to a bit of a conflict with Bosnia joining against Serbia. Along with Croatia and Slovenia. With Greece joining and Bulgaria joining. Turkey doesn't join at first. With Northern Macedonia joining. With the first fighting breaking out in this front. Right here. And it is a successful attack. with in exchange for Crete, a bit of Thrace and a bit of Bulgaria's lands, they won't intervene, said Turkey. So they accept it. They don't want Turkey on another front. With the Srpska becoming a thing, and quickly they move into Croatia. With Croatia about to fall, they tell Slovenia to leave the war, as they don't want another Balkan nation to fall. With Italy's okay with, because they just annex us. With the fall of Balkan nations, let's see how the peace treaty went. Albania, which quickly gets annexed by Italy. But as you can see, the world has been changing spots and stuff. Ethiopia's less thinking of getting a coast, but then they do. With the EAF staying neutral, but this isn't a small war. People stay neutral because they don't want to get involved with wars such as Sudan because their economy is already fragile enough. A lot of nations in Africa don't want to get involved in wars because they know they have fragile economies. With sanctions probably being put on Ethiopia, with Ethiopia taking out Djibouti. Some nations not really doing much, but I would say there would be lots of wars if this happened as the economy would be shut off. But I would say we'll make this into a series, and this is just part one of it, let's say. And part one was basically how it happened, what happened, the immediate impacts and stuff. The fall of alliances and so on. The start of unifications, and the expansion of Germany and Italy and the Balkans. And the Russian Empire's return. Partial return. That's all for today's video. Please like and subscribe, as there will be a video on this again. In the future, I'll do another video on this if it does well. And that's all for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Bye, guys!